Possible Poetry, ein Podcast über neue Welten und Wege in der Poesie mit Dirk Hülstrunk. Possible Poetry, a podcast about new worlds and roads of poetry, with your host Dirk Hülstrunk.
La levitación de la semilla lanza modulaciones de tiempo en función de la tierra y su vibración. En O, en A, en O, en A, en O, en A. La levitación de la semilla como el lenguaje canta en la luz de la glotis para timbrar el mundo. En O, en A, en O, en A, en O, en A, en O. Por umbral. Método para descubrir el contorno de un silencio. Levitación, modulaciones, lenguaje, la luz de la glotis para timbrar el mundo. Oro, umbral, método para descubrir el contorno de un silencio. En O, en A, en O, en A, en O, en A, en O, en O, en O. Estática. Descansa el cuerpo sobre un paréntesis en función de la tierra y su vibración, como el lenguaje canta en la luz de la glotis para timbrar el mundo. La semilla, la levitación de la semilla, lanza modulaciones de tiempo en función de la tierra. Estática. En O, en A, en O, en A, en O, en A, en O. En A, en O, en A, orumbral. Silencio, estática, semilla, vibración. El lenguaje canta.
You are listening to episode 11 of Possible Poetry, a podcast about new worlds and paths of poetry. This episode will be in English. My name is Dirk Hülstrunk, and it's a real privilege that I'm able to meet and talk to poets from around the globe in this international podcast. And I'm also very happy that my podcast is now also part of literaturpodcasts.de, a great online platform for independent literature podcasts in Germany. Today I'm delighted to talk to Mexican poet and multimedia artist Rocio Ceróns. I believe Rocio is a perfect fit for possible poetry because she is constantly expanding the possibilities of poetry, in fact creating a very unique and rich artistic universe of her own. We just heard a short piece from a recent sound poetry sound art album Sonic Bubbles, and we will hear some more Sonic Bubbles in this podcast. You can find the album on Bandcamp side of Subunda and Breakbeats label from Mexico City, but you can also just check out Sonic Bubbles. So welcome to this online talk from Frankfurt am Main to Mexico City. It's a pleasure to have you here as a guest on my podcast. Welcome, Rocio Ceróns.
Hi, how are you? A pleasure to be here from Mexico all the way.
We have met in 2015 and 16, I believe, so it's
Yes.
Quite a while ago. You've been traveling a lot around the globe. You've been in Germany also, I believe. For a couple of projects.
I have been in Germany on 2022. I have a grant in Spain, and I was 3 months in Europe, and I went to Berlin to launch a new translation of a book called Nudo Vortex.
So you have 3 books out in German already, I think?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, we'll
Exactly.
put them in the show notes so you can find them. So for those of you who don't know Rocio Ceróns, she's one of the most important Mexican poets of a generation. She combines poetry with sound experiments, performance and video. Her projects have been presented and performed internationally, including at the Instituto Cervantes in Berlin, in London and Stockholm, at the Centre Pompidou in Paris, and at the South Bank Centre in London. And she's not only an acclaimed multimedia artist and performer, but she has also published quite a variety of poetry books, Many have been translated in different languages, including English and also into German. We just mentioned those 3 books you have in German already. What's really striking me when I was researching your work, the real massive output you seem to have, creating poetry books, performing, creating sound art, collaborating with numerous other artists, being present at many international festivals, and also covering a real wide variety of themes and ideas. What are you working on right now?
I've been exploring the idea of the evoked potentials. It's a way that the neurologists, they put you some simulation, like lights, robotic lights, or some noises, and you can, they use it so with child, so they can notice if they have some problem, like neurological problem. But in my project, I use this like a way of semantize the electroencephalogram, that they took me an electroencephalogram, and I was going to find in my memory a childhood photography with my 2 brothers and my grandmother. And then I went to make a performance on a garden of the Casa House, the Luis Barragan house. He's a very well-known architect, and he has an amazing garden. So I was just remembering those days on that garden and that picture, that photography, and I make an action. The video is in the web, and it's a video poem, like a performance video poem. And it was also chosen for the Bienal of Photography here in Mexico, because the first thing is that photography of the infants. And then I start making some poems, and I start making some video poems and soundscapes and sound poems, and working with people that they don't see, with blind people on some places, putting some sounds to them. Idea of all the evoked potentials series is to make this project about textuality, video, and performative body, and what happens on the pre-language part of your body and your mind. Now, what happened on the scream, what happened on the first word, that it can be just whispering, or like balbuceo, like when you just are bubbling the words, So evoked potentials is one of the projects that I'm working, because the other one is Speculari, that is about the future of the language, and also has some sound pieces. And I will release now in October the album of that series.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds super interesting, especially connecting like neuroscience and poetry and art in this way, and also that you're trying to look for like the pre-language effects, and which is kind of strange as a poet, because you're so focused on language, but you're looking also for what has been there before the language, and so it's also a part of the communication, maybe also part of your poetry then.
I don't know what happened, like when you're making also soundscapes with another artist. I have been asking this for some of my sound artist friends and poets about what happened before. If you are not writing, so if you don't write, but you are like performing and improvising. I love to improvise. What happens on the pre-language? And I think the future vestige of language is that, to put that energy, on the pre-language stage, something that is on the murmullos and on the whispering. I think there can be very interesting places to perform and to research about the way that the language was constructed thousands of years ago. What is there? It's like a liminal zone with significance or not significance of the signification of the sound, like the pure sound with the voice. I've been experimenting a lot with the voice the last things.
So you're trying to go back to the beginnings of language. How did language evolve?
I mean, the language was modified, constructed with this kind of like fragments of voice, the expression of the language, the expression of the voice, the expression of the singing, of what we are singing, because language, as you are talking and I'm talking, and the way that we express our language, like in English or in Spanish or in Dutch or in German, is different. All the language has their own music. But what happened before the apparition of that language? No, what happened on the way that maybe thinking or feeling is also not on the way the language appears. So I think it's not the same to live like in the Amazonic landscape with those gigantic nature, to live in a country, I don't know, like the northern of Germany that is very cold, and there is a kind of a forest there. No, is the relation of nature and the relation with ourselves and our environment are very important on the way that the language was created and the way we sing, also the way we talk. No, so I'm very interested on what happened before that.
That sounds like a very scientific approach, actually. So
yes.
You're trying to create something between science and poetry. But what is your concept of poetry then? Well, what is the poetic idea behind that?
Well, I think the poem is like an extreme case of language, and it's an affirmation, no? And there's something between these extreme case of the language of the poem, that what happens on the poem, the energy of the poem, and I think the poem also, it's in the middle. It's between a gesture when someone puts like a woman's hand immersed in the face of her father, of the suspension of particles and fluffing all the way those particles in the air. The poem is created on those betweens of energetic bodies. For me, the poem is always alive. So it's not like an static thing that is happening. It's something that it's alive. It's alive in the way that when you read a poem, you're making those particles of the poem gets alive in front of you. When you make a performatic reading, or when you make like an sound poetic performance, you are putting your body and you're putting everything that is already on the poem, but it can expand the particles of the energy that is inside of the poem. That's why I love to make performance and improvisation. No,
the poem is not just what is written down somewhere, Sonne, but it's much more, and it really comes alive, of course, when you are on stage, when you're performing, and when you put it together with other elements, with sound and visuals. Maybe we should just hear a poem just to get into the feeling of your kind of poetry.
I'm gonna read a poem that you can find it also in Spanish and in English and in German, and it's called 112. And I think I'm gonna read it in Spanish a little bit and then in English.
So from which book is that?
That's from Diorama. Diorama, it's already published in German, and it's called 112. 112. 112 steps escape talent of one who knows long oral winters. Vocal stammering, rhythm unfold in fugitive leaf. How else could hatred speak? Face or cross of an alphabet resolved by rending. Double entry, game in ellipses. Pray not our Father or the Ave Maria. In your accent name all that is. On top of the letter hide the heart anatomy. It breasts already unguarded. Terror smells the shoulder. We pray on the beach la herradura elucidated fears. Piece by piece, geography checks of hand carved nightsticks, mouth of the well snipper shot organ. 20th century embossed by hand, no hints, central beveled mirror, solid legs, the decoration somewhat severe, the epoch's the black marble, tell yourself it's an heirloom for experts. Entonces la risa desvanecía todo oropel, falla y angustia. Nombrábamos la letra N para contradecir horas y censuras. Desciende del ojo de luz tracería radial que los santos devoren tus años. Gira el carrusel horadado de balas, ni la hojarasca o el rayo solar hablan de voces cautivas. Atrás de lo inmóvil los amos y un par de viejos ciegos. Aire sofocante en trono. Gira la espuma, cáscaras de pijuayos, zarazás, restos mudos donde se hunde la palabra certeza. golpea la puerta, desciende, aprieta, culpa, argolla, nudo profético, trituración donde gravita el odio. Los pájaros entonces dormitaban. Aguarda la boca una intensa geografía de espigas. No carcelero, no verdugo, no deudor, no quien oprime el petálico pecho del infante, levanta la noche, sábado, viernes, cordaje que adecua las potencias del golpe. Osana, 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 Osana. The notation served as a medium, cross-reference with the report, scores, or an outline where the page springs forth calligraphy. Dark green bundle of branches were scarcely full cracked secret orifices where the era grows short. Eyes. I'm telling you. Alphabetical order will eventually disappear. The chest lingering pentagonal atoms hinge between gesture and sound. Articulation. On the Black Mountain, they share the same cotton black with blood. It doesn't matter whether it comes from the sea, river, mountain range, communal feasts of scraps, cadaver. Here, the people are free to come and go as they please. Y hasta ahí lo voy a dejar. I think they're in one of the fragments of 112. It's a little bit larger, the poem, but I think we can just leave it there. And Diorama was written in a moment where the narco war with the drug bands, they were very present. Also, they were very in and some of the poems like this one are about what you hear and what you notice that there is happening, but no one wants to say. Mm-hmm. No one wants to tell that just in the back of your house you have someone, that there is a house, like a security house for kidnappers, no? So, or there's that in the house of the people that is already just living, like in the corner of your neighborhood, is like a drug dealer, no? So there was like a lot of violence, and but there were like a violence, like an electric energy, and Diorama talks about that and talks about also about the language. 112, it's like when you come and go on a scale, and you can go and come from a place which is supposedly happy, but it's not, because something is going on the subterranean parts of the house or of the country, no? And Diorama also talks that you can change the drawings, the paintings in the back. You can put like these animals, no, were in the jungle, like a lion or whatever. So you can change the decoration, but the way that human condition is always the same, no? Mm-hmm. They are wars, they are desire, they are hates. There are a lot of things going on since the beginning of the human life.
So you did have a concept when you wrote this book. What do you want to talk about? So it wasn't just a collection of some poems.
No, yeah. I usually don't work like that. I usually work not like I write some poems and I put it together and I just like work with them, like to make, I don't know, like some sections, and then no, it's not all a collection of poems. In fact, each book has like their own research. Diorama was about that. Nudo Vortex, it's about how to move and how to recover like a place that you have been changing. No, also, each book has like some lines of investigation, some lines of research, and then I start writing the books, but with an idea or a concept, more like a contemporary project, art project. No, but you have the notion and the concept. And then you start working with, not only with the poems and with the video poems, performatic, sound installation. It's more like an organic and constellation or constellar body of work than only like the poems.
You're working on the poems themselves, the written poems, and the visual and the sound parallel? Is it a parallel process?
Yes, it's a parallel process, and I think maybe happen the same to you, is that when you're working on the poems, when you're writing the poems, and you start like understanding and feeling like, yes, like the body of the language there, you can see that they have like a sound. I mean, like Nudo Vortex was for me like very metallic, no, and so there was like and very percussions, no, with some metallic percussions. So there were like some noises. Bueno, that was done with some of this Tibetan that you put your hand and start making like this.
Mm-hmm.
And also in the presentation of the launch of the book, a music that he plays the guitar. He's from a heavy metal band, and so it was like that, like from the very abstract, like a little bit mystic of this Tibetan instrument to these more like notes of more metallic, rock metallic band stuff with the guitar. And then like Diorama for me was like very electroacoustic. So I invited to collaborate some artists, and from the and Diorama was also a dodecaphonic piece for a garden. So we make the intervention for the garden of the Fonoteca. In the process of the book, that it's I writing the book, just imagining that like a potential evoked potentials has an exhibition first, and some pictures and some video poems, and there was an exhibition the last year, and there is not a book now, not yet.
But it will come.
Not yet,
yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
So the process can be like the Sonic Bubbles. They were a performatic piece, then the Sonic Bubbles album, and now there is the book. But it was a project from 2017 to 2024.
Yeah, so that's very interesting that all these things are happening parallel, like the poems can be, or the book can be first, and then the other things are coming, but also the other way around, or parallel, as you say. So it's very interesting creative process you have there, which I think it's quite unique, especially because you're also publishing so many different media, in video poems, in books, and in performances. We already talked about language a little bit, but is still language the center of the whole thing? Would you say that?
That's a good question. But I usually say that I am a very devoted artist to language. No, in fact, in my back says I will defend poetry.
Yeah.
No, that it's a piece. That is a piece of an artist called Jorge Mendes Blake. That he's a very incredible artist, visual artist that works with language and with books and literature. And I think, yes, I'm very devoted to language, like Hanuman, no? Like the Hindi god, this monkey, amazing, and which I love, that he's devoted to the language. He is, in fact, the god that creates language and grammatica, no? The grammatics. But I think there is something between the language, that is the silence, or the betweens, or the gestures, some of the gestures, no? When you think about the invisible on the visible. And it's not about the mystics or like the religious of the invisible on the visible. It's more like in an aura, no? And something that is there on the objects, on the things, on the persons, that it can be, I don't know, I think it's a vibration. I think vibration, it matters a lot to me.
Because I was thinking in especially your multimedia works, language is really just, or even the poetry is just a part. You know, you have a strong visuals, you have strong sounds that maybe come from a heavy metal guitarist, you know, and then you have language, which is often also a layered language. It's not just like one clear sentence, but it's a multitude of voices you are layering there. I think the layering of language, visual, and other sonic aspects is very typical for what you're doing. So it looks like a kind of a mental landscape, like an inner mental landscape. Is that something?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, now that you're saying this of the inner mind landscape, also the response of my searching of evocated potentials was when I was on this hall of blind hall where they have these books with braille, the braille hall, and I saw a person reading there, closing his eyes and reading the book. And I just imagined perfectly, because he was moving his eyes and making some gestures in his face. And I imagined like a bubble, like a movie, not something that was happening there, but there was an energy. Really, I say, oh my God, he's just staying with the body, telling me the story, or telling me what he's feeling and reading by his energy. And I just think that it was like an holographic scene of his head, and that was the mind inner landscape. So yes, I think I create some or a lot of my projects beginning from a synesthetic principle, and I don't think you can use like this thing here and then this thing there. I think we are like a very interconnected sensibilities, all of the humanity. I just can't imagine one thing by itself. I imagine that things are all interconnected. And yes, I think the poem, I saw the poem, and I can see like the objects, I can see like the pieces there, the fragments, the layers, but it's not absolutely conscious. It's something that happens.
That happens in the subconscious somehow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. It's more like if I can just like, I can watch or see between the, entre las grietas, ¿no? O sea, that it means that I can see or feel between the cracks.
Yeah, so it's not so easy. It's not so easy to like analyze what you're doing there.
No.
In a rational way, because you just have to, well, kind of experience it with your senses, with all the senses. We have this project called Sonic Bubbles, and I like the idea of the bubbles that are coming up somehow from a sea of unconsciousness, maybe, or some inner landscapes or inner seas. And so in the beginning we heard one piece. Maybe we can just hear another piece.
El sonido de los huesos, su fricción, ya polvo, ya herida permanente en rostro, el fragor de los huesos triturados, su calce al paso de todo un cuerpo de nación, su silencio, su silencio, su silencio, toda la vergüenza que arde en él. El sonido de los huesos, su fricción, ya polvo, ya herida permanente en rostro. El sonido de los huesos, su fragor, huesos triturados, su calce al paso de todo un cuerpo de nación. Su silencio, su silencio, su silencio. Toda la vergüenza que arde en él.
Maybe we can also talk a little bit more specific on the role of sound in your language. When did you discover the role of sounds, or how did you start using sound in language?
I always imagine that objects have sound. O sea, that object, like, they talk with some sounds, no? So they have some sounds. My grandmother, she has a collection. She loves antiques, no? So she has a lot of objects from, I don't know, like from different kind of centuries. And once she was talking about these small heads from the Aborigines of the Amazonic, no, that it's called the Jibaros, and I was just amazed because they reduct the heads and they just put some on some collars, no collares here. 2 months after of that, about that kind of histories, no, my grandmother arrives, no, with that head, the reduced head of the Jibaros, no, and he has the mouth a little bit open, and they have some holes, no, on the head. And for me, it was very shocking because it happens to be that books, the things that my grandmother reads, they were real. Mm-hmm. So that for me was something amazed, no? So it was for me like the revelation. So what happens on the books are real. What happens on the code are real, no? And the other thing is that I usually draw like some alphabets. That's why I'm now on the project 2 of this speculary vestige of the future language. And I draw when I was a child, and I saw, like, I was just drawing and saying, this has a sound. How can I notice the sound of this word? No, so I invent some sounds for that alphabet. And when this head arrives to my house, I was amazed, but also I was very afraid because I was thinking that if you can go on the night and you can see the head will talk to you. Mm-hmm. No, so that's something. It doesn't matter that there were nothing, only the skin of the head. No, in this small head, he has voice. It's like he has a vibration, something that he can say. So for me, those things like the image that can have a sound, or an image or a code or an object that can have a sound, and those like inanimated object like the head that can speak, for me were like a revelation in my childhood, because it means that things have sound. Mm-hmm. Sounds that you can hear it if you can notice how to hear it. And it's not like an schizophrenic stuff that things talk to me or objects talk to me. No. It's like really they have a vibration, and if you can hear it, no, you can notice that the colors and the object have a vibration. That vibration, it can be a sound. Mm-hmm. How do you translate that sound into poetry, and how you can put those sounds into your voice?
So that was one of your motivations to write poetry,
exactly.
Then? Yeah? Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. No, that was my motivation, that language, it was so amazing that it can, the people that write, that they make real things, also that the things get real, no? Mm-hmm. Usually poets are the first in the wars that they get killed. Why? Because they have language, and they have this powerful force that is language, no? That is that they can speak, they can give voice to others and speak. So for me, it's very important, and there is a lot of people that think that poetry is not so important now than in other centuries, in other times. But I think it's very important because it's part of the memory, mm-hmm. no, of the memory of who we are and who we were, no, who will be.
And it seems to connect us also to like the world
Absolutely.
Outside, and even to the objects around us. So that's a very interesting idea, that you create like a connection with all of things that are happening around you, and you transform them somehow into something different. Maybe we should hear some more of your poetry then?
I'm gonna read from Nudo Vortex, which also you can find it in English and in German. And just a fragment, because I will read from the last poem that closes the book. There is some here in English and Spanish. The title of the piece in English is 5 Movements from a Mid-Air Gesture. 1328, the circular nature of a thought, what the body holds in its veins, metaphor, the liquidness of inner veins and channels. Those sit high between the backs of knees, gaze lost precisely on the horizon, lichen, fragility of the coastline within a blind spot, shortcut of breeze that covers the flight of certain words, hand that crosses, brushes against the face, pointing toward the place where there are murmurs, only murmurs, the exactitude of an inner babbling, where the true manner of paternal voices occurs behind the left ear, the paleness of Eleonora's hand, tracing the contours of an imaginary elephant, and that smile, that half smile at the corner of his mouth. And in Spanish, 13:40. Se confunde el surco donde los cardos han dejado marcas, rebalse, cardumen de peces agitándose entre piernas, ebullición de sangre en ramificaciones, abrasiva, la marcha sobre el muslo se expande, cada centímetro es inicio, toda división inexacta, rebalse, las hojas de los árboles caían encima de sus hombros. Entonces callaba el mundo. And the third one, in English too, 13:53. Anomaly of the pose, body weights positioned with regard to vulnerability. Each wound overcomes and extends an aura, counterweights, the sensitive nature of the navel, memory of the belly, moisture of the word mother, weights that restitute the failure of the mind. In silent folds, fissures, stays are positioned, overflow. Granite and tobacco overcome landscape, hands not a sonata in mid-air. When the voyage intuits the horizon, time gravitates over the eye, lichen, underbrush, a desert where lips are cracked from never saying your name. Yes, ready? There is a third, and I think I'm gonna read one more. 12:56 from these 5 movements from a mid-air gesture, and it says, course of time foreshadowed, overfalls of age, life, the unsettled, a history already foreshadowed by contraction, a reality that shall become fiction, fiction folded to the skin on your own, there on the high, that not where a constellation is held, a universe over which all garments of epidermis are gathered. Molar, a symphony of moles on the left arm. Score of signs where the fate flickers, a gesture, a brush where bodies shelter one another. Cantata.
Thank you. So these were the 5 movements from the Nudo Vortex.
And you can find the German also translation. They were published on the Poetry International page.
So maybe can you just tell us what was your basic concept with Nudo Vortex, and also with these pieces now? The very specific thing here, you have like numbers, and it's like time codes, or what are they saying really? The titles are really time codes, or what are they?
Yeah, well, Nudo Vortex, it was a book that I wrote in planes. In fact, there was a time that I was just like flying a lot, and it's not a very large book. This is the original edition, no? And there are like 8 poems, no? There are some larger ones than others, but they were just like, in a way, how to be body and language, and how to make transmutations of our ways of seeing the life, no? So the first poem says, open your eyes, close your eyes, no? Look the object as an lenguaje hirviente, that it means that how you can see language, no? Like a boiling language, closing and open your eyes and seeing that all the language are all together. So Nudo Vortex was written in planes, in a moment that I was like absolutely thinking of what happened on the periods of your life that you're changing. And it's like a skin change book, no? And this poem, 5 movements on a gesture of mid-air, they talk about being in different times of your life, but it can happen on the same day, no? How you can feel that your life is changing, that you are on the process of changing, and you can see that things on different times of the hour. I like that kind of poems that you can put like 12:24 and then 13:58, because it's the way that you also are thinking, no? The way that you can meditate about yourself, and if you are very open, you can see that you have been changing, world is changing, and you're open to those changes. No? And Nudo Vortex is about that. And the principle of Nudo Vortex is that the water on a certain vortex, in this vortex, no, in a certain velocity, it makes knots. So the water makes like a knot and then dissolve the knot. And I say, well, if the water makes knots, no, also our emotions and our feelings make knots with the others. And I think this book talks about that, no? Talks about Nudo Vortex, like these kind of knots that you make with others, with your affections, with your way, with your child or with your love, no? And it's also a book of what is coming and going and making these knots on your feelings, the time, your questions about life.
There's a reoccurring themes in your poetry, really, like memory or the body, which is also present in this book. I think it's always the body is always there, but also memory and mental issues, and so these are kind of mixed. But you use a sometimes very fragmented or collaged language. Why not writing straight a story about your body and the air, So why do you use this collage type of language?
Yes, because as you said, I love condensation and layers and superpositions, no? When you see something, you are not seeing like one in a linear way, no? So you're watching even with your side, no? With the side of the eye, no? O sea, you can see with the corner of the eye, no? O sea, also. So when you are looking like this scene, I'm looking you, but I am also looking Orfeo and my daughter and a postcard that said, "What if woman ruled the world?" And something that says, "Laissez le bon temps brûler," and something that's called "Mama te amo," which is my daughter's, no? Or something about a coffee. It says, "Not a people person without a coffee." No, o sea, all of those things are getting in my body. No, anything is just one way. For me, it's like everything here sounds, makes vibration, and speaks on the phone. So and memory, because I'm very used to work with three concepts: memory, space, and time. Or time, space, memory, as you wish, you can change. Mm-hmm. And so I usually, my poems are worked like with different kind of voices, like a symposium of voices, no? It's like my ear, I can listen to a little bit of the radio in the apartment, on the next apartment, no? Bueno, listening that the radio is there. And it's something that I start learning, I don't know, like when I was 14, 15, to hear different kind of layers. But to hear is also to see. So for me, it's not disconnected, the visual with the sound, or the epidemic, no, the skin, the sound, everything is all together and put in position on the world, so you can put everything there. So when I write a poem, I usually make that all that thing speaks. So it's like a superposition, layers, and voices, no, that make all this kind of construction of the poem, no? That is something that I have been making since I started writing.
But there's another part I would like to talk about, and connected to the memory and maybe the way you work with biographical details, because like poets or artists can do that in a very different way. I think it was most obvious to me in the book Tiento,
yes,
where you were kind of working with your family history, but still it's not a biographical book. It's much more. So how is that the idea to work with your own biography? How would you integrate that in your poetry?
Well, like Tiento, that's a very good example. Some of the things that I usually say to my students, and because I'm a professor of poetry, is that you can fiction too. So you can make, so poetry is truth. That you always can hear like poetry is truth. No, fiction is fiction. Yes, poetry can be truth and it can be absolutely on your biographical or your experience or whatever, but also it can be fictional. In Tiento, as you said, it's a very biographical book, but I am not from Serbia. No, o sea, the book starts on Kalemegdan on Belgrado, on Belgrade. But one of the reviews of the book that I love was a review that says this is a biographical book of Cerón, and it's a book that touched a lot because it's very biographical, blah 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 blah. And I said, well, I never born on Serbia. My family is not from Belgrade, and in fact, in the research of the book, it was a very strange book because I wrote the book with a map, a mental map with some ideas and concepts, and I sent it to the musician and to the composer and the photographer. And I said, well, I don't have anything, but these are my like ideas of what I want to write, and just do whatever. And there were no poems already on that time. And then I started writing with the idea that what happens with the women that comes from Europe to America and how they live and how they survive and what happened to them, no? So because they usually come with their father and the father makes like a business something, and here in Mexico we say hacer la América, to make the America. So you come to America and you make your business and you get rich. And what happened to these women that come alone or come with a child, you know, and they make how there was her stories, no? And that's the story. And they come to the south of America, from Patagonia, from Uruguay, and they start coming and they change their last name, and everything gets invented, everything gets fiction, no? But I decided that it would be like a lot of biographical things that were important for me, from my father, mother, brother's family story, but displays, no, I displays all to start there and to talk about my mother, me, and my daughter, because Eleonora, it's my daughter on all my books.
Okay.
No? And this was the first book. Yes, this was the first book I wrote. She born on 2009, and the book was published on 2010. And in fact, there was the house, also the small press house, asked me for a book, and I don't have anything, so I just put the concept, and then I start making the poem from there, and with this idea. And at that time, I was reading an essay. It wasn't an essay. It was more like an interview with Marina Abramovic about the erotic Balkanic series, the photographies. And I said, well, yes, why not to start on Serbia, no, on Belgrade. And I say, yes, it can start there. And it starts there. That's why it starts there. So I researched like the last names, the name of the most known poet, the historical places. I make a research, so the book, it has that kind of like a very like a grave, where is a grave of the poet, or what is the last name of the family. Everything, I make a research for writing the book. And in fact, this is the original cover, it looks like it's a family, no? Also, because there are these women, no? But in fact, the photographer, Valentina Siniego, she was on the fly market, like the fly market on Frankfurt or Berlin. She was on a fly market on a Sunday. She just watched this, a package of photos with the same girls, no, like in a trip, and she buy it. And she decided to take the picture of those on that red in the back, and that's the cover of the book. So what is real and what is fiction?
So
and
it's a
love
fictitious biography kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah, and but the interesting idea is also that it's also a story of migration, as you say, like of women migrating from Europe to South America, and but also the process of migration seems to be like a transformation where you can invent yourself in a new way. So it's so that's maybe one part of that. That process, maybe that works sometimes better, sometimes not so good, but it's possible. Maybe can we hear something from that book?
Yeah, I'm gonna read one of the poems from America. That is the central section, and it also has photographs. And also the German edition, which is really nice, has the music. Also has the music. I mean, when I say has the music, it had
the notes, the score.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
And
really beautiful. Yeah.
yes, it has the score and it has the pictures and the poems.
So if you can read the score, you can play it actually.
Yes, it's the score is for cello, and you can play it too from this score. Bueno, América. América es un desierto sonoro. Cazuela de ave levanta muertos, ají de gallina abre sosiego, trucha arcoíris empina rubias. Oscuras nubes modulan temperamento de valle y bufeo. Crujido de lastras de Machu Picchu, oscuro oficio este de ser santa. Yo tenía una tierra, me despojaron de ella, ahora hay un parque de diversiones. Juegos replican la muerte y son la muerte. Algo en la vereda, zanjita, zanja, devuélveme el tino, la cara cierta de mi tierra, es sepultura de inocencia. Aguachile que bulle en la quijada. Cacao herido que trae consigo tintineos de piedra, cárcamo de agua de Tlaloc, chacras marítimas de manantiales, Cabo Polonio en mi memoria, y la fuente que no deja de abastecer el mate seco, verdoso, que enjuaga la voz de la abuela.
Yeah, thank you. I just saw that the book has really two parts. The one part is the starting point of the migration, and the second part is America, and that's what you were reading right now.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think it's those three women that we can see in that process migrating. Yeah. So they're creating a new life, like inventing new things, but also maybe it's easier for them now because there is no man dominating them. Is that one of the ideas? Yeah.
Well, it's more like the father was killed on the war, and they just moved out because of necessity, as all migration movements are. No, but also it talks about the grandmother, the daughter, and the nieta, the grandchild, because I think it was also my grandmother, my mother and I, but also it's my mother, I, and my daughter. Because my grandmother comes from another state to Mexico City. She was from Aguascalientes. I mean, here, I don't know, before everything happens that if you come to the capital, to Mexico City. So my grandmother was a nurse, and she studied on Aguascalientes, but she moved from Mexico City because also she was helping her brothers to economically. So she came to Mexico City because she has better opportunities to develop her career, no? So that kind of migration, it's always, you can see that there's like small migration, large migrations, but always it's something that you have to move out from a known place, and this displacement, what happened with the people with the displacement, no? How they arrive, how they change their culture, how they change the things that they like, or what they bring, no, what they have, like a way of identity that has, and they protect always, and they can be what they heritage, no, what they put to the others, to the family. I said this is very important to not forget, not forget the way the father, the grandfather, the grandmother, etc. So that book is like an homage to my grandmother and to my mother, and it's like a testament also to Eudora, because my daughter, it's called Eudora, but I want not to sign her on the books like with her name, and just she converts on Eleonora. She knows that everything that says Eleonora in my books is for her, no?
And also I find interesting to see from like a maybe North American or European perspective, that we perceive like a country like Mexico to be a country where migrants come from a lot, you know.
Yes.
But we tend to forget that, of course, a lot of migrants went there, you know, after the Second World War, of course, and in other times before. And so it has also been a migrant destination, which is probably true for many countries. So it's not just one way.
Exactly. I think migration movement and family bonds are always in the middle of everything. I mean, since like the very foundational stories, like the Bible, or like I don't know, the Egyptian or whatever you can go inside, like the foundation books, there were always a migration movement. So there's something that cracks, something that gets like a movement, so you can make the foundation of something else, no? Of a new nation, of a new land, of a new territory. I have 14 books of poetry, one of essay, 2 albums of sound poems, and the third one that comes on October. So it has been 30 years of writing, from 1994 to now. And I think it's good, it's okay. And now I'm just like moving on to say what happens with these in-betweens, no? In-betweens of sound and language, in between of mind and soul, in between of our story now, in between of times, of historic times, no? Also, Speculari, series of poems I'm writing about the vestige of the future language, no? So it's like the future on the future, but it's now. So I'm just like speculating what's going to happen on the future.
Retina áurica, escucha retiniana, trasvasar los sentidos en la mente. Flujos en permanencia, lenguajes nómadas, solo tránsito, lenguajes nómadas que rearticulan las formas de la mirada y la escucha. Cada salida, cada entrada, posibilidad, riesgo, ruta, transcurre entonces el milagro del sosiego. Escucha tu pulso sanguíneo en el fémur izquierdo de tu cuerpo. Tránsito, lenguajes nómadas que rearticulan las formas de la mirada y la escucha, lejos en permanencia. Cada salida, cada entrada, cada salida, lenguajes nómadas, transcurre entonces el milagro del sosiego. Traspasar los sentidos en la mente. Retina áurica, escucha retiniana. Transcurre, cada salida, cada entrada, transcurre entonces el milagro del sosiego.
You were just listening to Sonic Bubble number 9 from the album Sonic Bubbles by Mexican multimedia artist and poet Rocio Ceróns, who is my guest in this podcast. So the last question to remain on this podcast is about the Mexican poetry scene. How open is it really for experimental poetry?
I mean, the poetry scene in Mexico, as I think in other parts of Latin America, is very, very open to experimentation in some ways, in some circles, no? And people are very amazed now with the intelligence artificial, with the artificial intelligence, no? So they are making a lot of works with the digital and some videos, no? It's a lot now. A lot of people want to make like some video poems with the artificial intelligence. They are very good artists doing that, like Anet Zapata or Carlos Ramirez Cobra. But I think the sound is strange because there are some poets and some sound artists that they are looking for, and mostly are female.
Oh, okay.
Woman.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Interesting.
Like Barbara Lazara. Barbara Lazara was on the DAT, on the grant. There's another poet called Lucia Hinojosa, but she's like a visual and poet artist, no? Now the there's an artist that is from Mexico. She's now in Berlin too. But I think there is more experimental in the poetry scene, more with the image, with the video, and sound comes more with women and performing and making some things with stones and with nature, no, with very connected with nature, no. I don't know what's gonna happen, but it's interesting that things are moving on the poetry scene, because usually poetry scene in Mexico it's very conservative.
Like
no?
in most countries, it is actually.
Like in most countries. Yeah. So I think there is a movement now that there are these places, these small venues that present, and they are open their spaces to more expanded poetry, to poetry that comes from sound, or that comes from visuals, or that comes from other materialities that are making these dialogues with the poetry, no?
And I just wonder, Mexico has such a rich tradition of art and poetry and everything. How much does that connect with like new or even experimental art and poetry?
Poetry scene is very conservative.
Yeah.
Normally. But the contemporary art scene, more and more people from contemporary art, is very interested on using poetry as a materiality on the pieces. So I've been, I don't know, teaching on Soma, School of Art, made by artists, by contemporary artists, no? And they are very interested on making pieces with poetry. And there are a lot of amazing visual artists that make things with poetry, like Jorge Méndez Blake, the one that makes the Defenderé la Poesía. He has extraordinary pieces with poetry and visual arts. And also it's Jair Lopez, which is a sound artist, but he also writes some poetry. And I think it's that on that between, also on that kind of gap, no, where something is happening with poetry, with the contemporary art, with the visual art, with the sound art, more than the poets, also like the very, very poets, not that only work one language, is not so experimental.
So
I think it comes from other places.
Yeah, the new impulses for poetry really come from outside the traditional poetry.
Exactly.
Yeah,
out from the school.
Yeah.
Out from the university.
And maybe just to finish off, so do you have a poetry recommendation that we should know over here in Germany, something that we don't know about yet?
Yes, I think one of our antecessors of poetry is Ulises Carrión, which Ulises Carrión make the Poet's Tongue, which is on the web, and he has extraordinary pieces, also like essays of art and the ways we understand language, and he's a very important, I think, very actual also artist. and you can find on the web like his sound poems, his essays, and the way he worked with the poem and and the text and the way he runs. And the other one is Jorge Méndez Blake. He really is so good. And Ulises Carrión, I think Ulises Carrión, you know it. And Jorge Méndez Blake, he worked with the language in so many ways, with architecture, with sound, and he is really a very poetry defender. We have been talking about, he believes in poetry like an extraordinary force of changing, of a way of seeing things and living things on life. So his work questions about the way we make our relationship with language.
Sorry for stretching your time limit a little bit.
No, don't worry.
But it was a super interesting conversation, I think. I'd just love to hear all that.
Great to see you and hear you.
Well, thank you so much for joining me for this podcast. And it was great to see you again. You were listening to Podcast Possible Poetry. My name is Dirk Hülstrunk and my guest was poet and multimedia artist Rocio Ceróns from Mexico. You can find all the info about my guest and her publications and links in the show notes on the Possible Poetry blog on Podigy. You can also listen to this on all major podcast platforms on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts on Deezer. Possible Poetry is also part of the literature podcast communities at litradio.de and literaturpodcasts.de in Germany. If you don't want to miss new episodes, please subscribe to Possible Poetry on the Podigy blog. If you are in Frankfurt, visit our poetry window with books and videos by Rocio Ceróns at Salon Schlitz am Alten See 6 in Frankfurt-Rödelheim. This podcast would not be possible without the support of Kulturamt Frankfurt. Thank you. Possible Poetry.